Hey everybody, and welcome back. Certainly glad you could join me today. In this episode we are going to finally allow character clicks to present dialogue options, and we're going to do probably something else as well. Obviously, before I get started, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who hits subscribe and hits that notification icon. That's always going to help me out. And obviously an even bigger thank you to my patrons and subscribers. Your names will be running across the bottom of the screen as we speak. If you are interested in supporting the channel, then feel free to visit the Patreon link in the description below, or just become a member of this channel by hitting the join button next to the subscribe button. So let's get going. So what I've done here is I've come into our character screen that we created a couple of episodes ago, and where it said null action in the action, all I've done is I've set variable click type to character click, and then returning the character's forename. And that's all we need to do in this one, because we're awesome and we've already kind of planned ahead for this eventuality. So in our scripts, in our game loop, I've got if click type equals character click, and the only reason I've done this in advance is because it's try and minimize the amount of typos that I have. And then in there I've just hit pass for now. We will add a function once we've defined it. So we need to come into our functions.rpy, which is another file that we've already created, and we're going to define, and we're going to say character click, and then we're going to say we're going to actually accept a parameter in this one. It's going to be the location, but we're just going to put LOC because we am lazy. So we also need some global variables, so we need to hit global there and come back into our classes.rpy so we can figure out what they're called. So we need to get dialogue and we need to get chain. So back into functions, so you're going to say dialogue, and we also need global chain. So what we want to do in this, the first thing we want to do is rule out any dialogues that are not for the character that we've clicked on. And we also need to rule out any which are not for the location that we're in. So we actually also need global again, and we need UI. And let me just double check what that variable is called, because we're returning. So we need the UI return variable, and we need that to be in our global variables as well, like that. And just as a reminder to anybody who may not have paid attention in a previous lesson or something, what we have here is when we define a function, any variables that we create inside that function or that we use inside that function will be exclusive to the function. So if we were to just access the dialogue variable inside this function without it being the global version, it would just be a none type. What we need to do is we need to tell this function to access the global version of the dialogue variable so that we can talk to the rest of the game, basically. So we've got dialogue chain and UI return. So the first things that we want to do is we want to check if they are relevant to the correct person. Now, if I remember correctly, in our classes file under dialogue, we already have a check which accesses the location and the NPC. However, we don't really want to use this check. We want to just build a whole new one from scratch, because this one at the moment is useless to us. It's useful in its own way for other things, but what we're trying to achieve right now is no good. So what we want to do is, the first thing we want to say is for Q in dialogue. So we're going to loop through our dialogues, and we're going to say if q.participant is not the same as UI return, then that's nothing. Actually, we need to check that it is equal to, so we need to make sure that it is, otherwise we're going to get all muddled up. So we're saying if the participant, and we're going to check that that's actually correct yet, participant with a small p is equal to the person that we've clicked on, and we're going to double check that again because we don't want any fluff ups. So the participant is just going to be the NPC's forename. So that's all good. That's absolutely superb. So we're saying if the name is correct, if we're clicking on the correct person, if q dot location, and again we're going to come back to our classes and check that that's correct. Location with a small l, yes. If q dot location equals to lock, or q dot location is equal to nothing. So what we're saying is that because there might be some dialogue opportunities at some point in one of our dialogues where we've said it needs to speak to a specific person, but it doesn't really matter where. So if you were going to say hello to someone, it doesn't matter what room they're in, and then you need to be able to control that, because there might be some dialogues that have to happen in a specific place. So yeah, it's good to have that variable in there, so you can say if it's none or if it's equal to that. But we don't want to do the same thing for the participant, because we're clicking on a specific person, so we aren't checking for those dialogues that don't have a participant. We need it to be the specific person that we've clicked on. It doesn't necessarily matter if they're in the right location or not. Now what we need to do is we need to actually cross-reference it with our chain. So we need to say, we need to create a new variable to make this a bit easier, otherwise we're going to have to keep typing something. So we're just going to say ch equals q dot, and now we come back to our classes and check what that is. So it's actually chain and it's actually sequence. So we're going to say q dot chain, and then we're going to say sq equals q dot sequence. And this is just for simplicity, so that we don't have to keep typing q chain and q sequence later on. That's really what this boils down to. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if sq equals chain ch dot, and then come back to our classes, and we're looking for sequence again. So I'm just going to copy that. Okay, that's cool. So I could have just put those in there, to be fair, q.sequence and q.chain, but I prefer to just have them as variables like so. So, all right, so let's go through this one more time to make sure that we're all clear what we're doing here. We've created a function called character click. And in that character click variable, we have accessed the dialogue global variable, we've accessed the chain global variable, and we've accessed the UI return global variable. We've also input a parameter, which we don't necessarily have to do. I'm just doing it so as an example of how we would do this in future, so that you guys can play around with this later on. For every single dialogue, we are checking, have we got the right participant? If yes, then we go to the next step. If we are in the right location, or the dialogue does not require a location, that's great, we'll go on to the next step. Now we're we're cross-referencing the chain and sequence numbers that we've assigned to this dialogue, i.e. is it in chain 1 and it's sequence number 3? Is chain 1 currently at sequence number 3 or not? If yes, then we will do something. If not, we will do nothing. So that's great. We've currently now got ourselves to a stage where we can start building a list of tuples for our menu. So that brings me to the next thing that we need to do, is we actually need to change something here, because when I was originally writing this code, we left out an important variable. So we actually need to add something to this class. And so it's actually a good thing that we've only written 3, because we actually need to create a new property. And this one is going to be the init text. And then we're gonna let's just copy that to make life easier. Control C. So we're gonna say self dot init text equals init text. Add our space in there. And now what we need to do is we need to append something here. So what the init text is the text that's going to appear in the menu, the text label for the button. So we know where it's going to go because it's going to go to LBL label, but we need to actually display something in the menu. Otherwise it's just going to not know having anything to say, and we don't want that. So we're going to put different things in there. We're going to say hi again in that one. Seriously in that one. And then in this last one, we're just going to put cool. Okay. And what I actually want to do is swap these over so that we can check the functionality. So we're actually going to cut that. We're going to paste it there. And then we're going to change this to 0, 0 and change this one to 0, 1. So now the first thing we have to do is go to the library and speak to Danielle. And then whatever else happens after that, we'll deal with later. Okay, so we're coming back to our functions.rpy and we need to create a list of tuples. So first thing we want to do is up here, we need to create a global variable with a small, there we go. And we're just going to call this choice list. And then that way we can use it anytime we want to create a menu. So we're going to copy that. And then in our declarations file, we want to create a default. And then we're just going to say that's an empty list by default. There we go. And this is just going to say, this is going to be a list that we fill up with tuples at the start of every loop. So that if there's more than one option available, then it will fill that with everything. Otherwise, it will fill it with nothing. I think I explained that correctly. We will find out. So we need to now say choice list dot append, and we're going to open a square bracket there. So we need q dot init text and then q dot lbl. Cool. So right now we need to come back to copy that, actually copy that now, Control C, and we're going to come back to our script and we want to come to the end there. So we're going to, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say character click lock. So we need to say location in there, give ourselves a variable. So we're just going to go label to call equals Ren'Py dot display underscore menu. And now we're going to add our list, which is going to be, see, I've forgotten already. That's why it's always good to come back and check. Interact equals true. I think that's a small I for interact. If I, yeah, interact 1R. Interact equals true. And then screen equals choice. Close parentheses. Now, this is fine, except one thing. If there's no values in choice list, that's going to throw up an error. So what we actually need to do is we need to say if choice list, and we need to copy it from there, is not the same as an empty list. Good Lord. It's not the same as an empty list. Then we will do that. Otherwise, it's going to throw up an error. And then once the menu has been used, then we can say call expression label to call. Okay, so what we're doing in this one is we've said if you click on a character, then the click type variable is set to character click, and UI return is the character's forename. We then run this check, which we have in functions.rpy, which checks all of the criteria needed to make sure if that dialog should be displayed or not. And if the dialog is indeed able to be displayed, then we will put it into our list called choice list. Then we're going to display the contents of that list in our choices menu, and then once we have that, we will call expression, so we'll call whatever the value that's returned is. So that's all we need. One last thing I think I noticed just as we were checking this out, I think we need to put 2 brackets there so that it fills it with a tuple, because it's already a list. So now that we've added that extra bracket in, let's run and test our project, and hopefully we should see whatever the title of that dialogue is. So here we go. We've got to build our library so that we can go and speak to Danielle. So we need 20 grand for that. Hit library there. Visit our library. There's all of our Danielles, and it was Danielle the first. So we click on that, and boom, there is our menu option. So we hit that, event 1 started, boom. So what we haven't done is we haven't cleared it, but so far that's pretty good. So we can close that down, we hit yes, come into our code. So we've got global choice list, but we are not clearing the choice list. So what we need to do is we need to Control C that, and we just empty that, and that will mean that it starts a fresh list every time and it doesn't keep appending to it. Otherwise we'd end up with masses and masses of options. So yeah, that's working. So what we need to do now is I want to check that that option disappears once we've done that dialog once. So what we need to do first is come into our classes, and in our chain we need to add a new function. So we need to say, yeah, right. So we need to say def next, like that, next self. And all we're going to do is we're going to say self.sequence plus equals 1. And then that will just move on the sequence. And it's just a little bit of a neat little thing that we can do, because if we had a bunch of stuff going on here, then we can obviously add extra code into this. So I'm going to Control S that one. All right, so we've got our chain here in chain 0. So in chain event 0, 0, and we just need to check that that is actually the correct. No, it's not. So it's actually, we're just going to put chain. Yeah, right. Chain with a capital T, and then we're just going to say next. There we go. And we're going to put that at the end of every single one of these, like so. And then all that does means is that once the event's happened, it's going to go on to the next item in the sequence. So it shouldn't give us the option once we've done it once. So let's go back into our project. So we come into the library, we talk to Danielle once, we say seriously, and then silly me, that was my fault, sorry, we need to put 0 there. Oh dear, see, it's what happens when you don't pay attention to what's going on. So we need to replace that like that. Let's try that again. Go to the library, hit library, click on that, do that event, boom. Now when we click on it again, there's nothing to display, there's no available events, so no menu appears. Perfect, that is working like a treat. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about is how you could have a menu pop up rather than just showing the choice menu of dialogues. We've already covered the code necessary for you to display windows. That's how we got the top bar, how we got the build menu, and how we originally had the navigation menu on the left hand side, just by putting frames on the screen. So what you could do, rather than doing what we've done in our script where if click type equals character click, we just do a check and display the available dialogues. What you could do is you could go to another label that displays a different menu on the screen, shows different frames and all that sort of thing. Those are all things that by now you should have a reasonable inkling of how to do. It's just a case of calling a different label. In that label, it adds new screens to the UI, or you could have, for example, if character click, if click type of character click, you could toggle a flag. So you could say like UI spaz is on or off, and then in your main UI you could have a conditional. So you could say if spaz menu is on, use clickies, and then if not, it doesn't use the clickies. So, you know, those are all options that are available to you without any real difficulty on your part. Give it a try, and I will see you in the next episode, which I do believe will be the final one of the series. Thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye bye.